Andrew Gustafson lived in Townsend, Massachusetts with his wife and his 2 children. He was trying to get in touch with his wife, and he was calling the house in Townsend, but she wasn't picking up, so he was concerned. He came home and he found no sign of life at the house. He called for his wife, no answer. Called for his children, no answer. So he had this feeling of dread inside him. He went upstairs to the bedroom. And his wife was lying face down on the bed with a bloody pillow on top of her head. He didn't have it in him to go looking for the children, so he called the police and waited for them outside. This was just a horrific, horrific scene, and something that does not happen in little New England towns like this. So people were terrified. The entire area was terrified. On December 1st, 1987, when the police arrived, Andrew Gustafson told them that his wife was dead upstairs. She was also several months pregnant. And they questioned him, "How do you know she's dead?" And he said he just knew, and said that his children were probably dead too, but he hadn't gone to look for them. So the police didn't know what was going on.
I was notified by the state police headquarters of an unattended death in Townsend. We went upstairs, and in the bedroom, I observed the body of Priscilla Gustafson on the bed. I saw what appeared to be bullet holes in the back of the pillowcase, or the pillows that were on her head. She was partially clothed. One hand was tied to one of the bedposts, and on the nightstand was a half-empty bottle of beer, which I thought was very strange, and an open condom packet. When I went into the upstairs bathroom, I saw the body of a young boy, 5 years old, face down in the bathtub. We do try to compartmentalize those types of scenes so it doesn't affect the job that we do, but I just have a vivid memory of that little boy in the tub. And on the first floor was the body of a young girl, fully clothed, drowned in the downstairs bathtub.
To think what it would take to drown William and Abigail, just 2 innocent children, and not just killing them, but drowning them. That's physically hands-on, holding somebody under the water until they die. For someone to do that, it's beyond words, it's beyond evil.
Andrew Gustafson was an attorney. He was married to Priscilla. She taught Sunday school and kindergarten. She was well-liked in the community, and they seemed like they had an idyllic life. But as a homicide detective, you have to start from the very closest circle to the people who knew the victim. In this case, no one was above suspicion.
While police checked out Andrew Gustafson's alibi, almost immediately word spread. I mean, Townsend, Massachusetts is small town America, even though it's only 30 miles outside of Boston. This is kind of Americana. A lot of the cemeteries in this area go back to the 1600s, and so it has a really long history. It's a safe, quaint little New England town. And Townsend only had, in the 80s, probably 10,000 people.
This is your home for original reporting.
The murder was so horrific, it drew the attention of the Boston media, some national media, and the media descended upon that little town. Everywhere you turned, there was a sense of fear, a sense of, am I safe in this little town that I grew up in?
People were locking their doors. If they owned guns, they were making sure they were loaded. Everybody was looking out for their neighbors. People were looking out for anything suspicious. The entire area was on edge. So police checked out Andrew Gustafson's alibi, and it became clear he was not involved in the murders. This poor man lost his wife, lost his baby, and lost his 2 children, all at the same time with no known motive. It must have been just the worst possible day that anyone can imagine. So Andrew Gustafson spoke to the police, and he recalled that there were things missing from the house, and they'd had a burglary in recent days prior to the murders, where a cable box had been missing, where there'd been a glass of beer or a drink left out in the house. Things that didn't seem that serious at the time now took on importance. Police knew that there'd been a string of burglaries in the area. So when Andrew Gustafson told the police about the prior burglary, immediately they thought these might be linked. The police had a working theory that Priscilla and William had come home and caught the burglar there, and that this had been an impulsive crime. Abigail came home later. She was the last one killed. Police were looking at this as possibly just being an interrupted burglary. But everybody knew that we had a killer on the loose. No one knew where he was going to show up or what horrible crime would happen next.
During that time, I was a police lieutenant from the town of Pepperell, Massachusetts. When I heard of the murders and the nature of the murders, it sounded like something Daniel LaPlante would do. And I think he was entertained by such things. We had already arrested him on the charges of kidnapping.
He was certainly a person of interest based on his violent past. But this guy is a juvenile. Daniel LaPlante was only a 17-year-old boy.
But he was no ordinary teenager. He was a dangerous individual, cold, calculating, a very, very smart young man. He was on a path of escalation. His criminal acts went from routine breaking and enterings to the most sinister and bizarre acts that I had ever experienced.
Everybody knew that a killer was out and on the run, and everybody was looking over their shoulders. Police told people to stay indoors. They told people to keep their doors locked. Police had no idea what was motivating the killer. The fact that there'd been a string of local burglaries seemed like it was related because of the prior burglary in the Gustafsons' home. But were these even related to the burglaries? They really had no idea.
We developed a list of the usual suspects. And I use that term very loosely. It's people who had criminal background, who have committed violent crimes, who have been breaking into houses. 17-year-old Daniel LaPlante was on that list. We found out the house breaks, including stealing guns out of houses, all started to occur after he got released on bail. We were starting to put pieces together. A couple of detectives found him at a library in Townsend. So they went and spoke to him, and they didn't have a great feeling on the interview.
He told them that he had an alibi, that he'd been at a birthday party, and there were other people who could corroborate that, but he seemed a little jumpy, so police were suspicious. And then he just fled.
He was a person of interest, but we didn't have evidence that tied him to the scene. So we needed to gather as much information about Daniel LaPlante as we can. He had committed crimes in Townsend as a juvenile, and also in Pepperell, which is a neighboring town. He was arrested, was out on bail for the crimes he had committed in Pepperell.
Frank Bowen lived in Pepperell, Massachusetts. He was a bus driver, and he lost his wife to cancer in 1986. He had 2 daughters. Tina was a teenager in high school, and she had a younger sister, Karen. And the 3 of them were alone and grieving the loss of their mother, trying to cope with Frank working long, long hours and his daughters home alone. The daughters were not dealing well with the loss of their mother, and they were trying to contact her.
They had a seance. And while conducting the seance to try to communicate with the deceased mother, they started to hear noises, knocks on the walls. And they felt that it may be a signal from their deceased mother.
And then they started noticing things that seemed out of the ordinary. They'd come into rooms and they would find lights that had been off were now on. Things were moved in various rooms around the house. So they started asking their mother questions. And when they would ask questions, there would be knocking in response to it. So the 2 little girls who are dealing with the loss of their mother went and told their father that they actually had their mother in the house and she was trying to contact them. And the father, Frank, just thought that they were grieving.
It did create a disjoint between the 2 daughters and their dad. He honestly felt that they needed psychological help and that this was not happening. But that changed very quickly. On December 8th of 1986, the family had returned home and found that one of the toilets had been used. They immediately figured that somebody had been inside the home, and they started a search.
When he got up into his bedroom, Frank finds a man in there wearing this oversized coat in war paint, carrying an axe. It's like something out of a horror movie. And he took this family hostage.
He was very deliberate. He was very calm. He seemed to have no fear whatsoever. And he had secured them in that room and had left them there. At that point, one of the daughters escaped, was able to go next door, report the kidnapping, call the police, and we arrived. We searched the home, the woods around the home. We searched the area, the roads, and no suspect was found. As police officers, we had to believe the story as unbelievable as it sounded. I had covered murders, I had covered suicides, strange deaths. I had never encountered anything like this. During our search, I did find the hatchet just outside one of the doors. But as far as a sign of an intruder, we found none. No member of that family were able to identify the intruder. His disguise, apparently, and the fear he instilled made it impossible for them to identify who this was.
But now Frank knew his girls had been telling the truth, that there was something happening. It wasn't just in their minds.
Our thought was that the suspect, if he existed, had fled into the woods. We're talking nighttime. And it would have been very easy for the intruder to hide himself in the woods. And finding him would have been extremely difficult.
The family didn't want to be back in the house, understandably. The girls were just terrified, so immediately they went and just stayed in a hotel because they knew they couldn't sleep in that house again. Two days later, Frank returned to the house. And as he was approaching, he saw something. He saw the same man as before and thought, this man is trying to kill us. So Frank Bowen called the police.
I got there about 10 minutes later, and you could see he was distraught. And he said, I just saw him. He's in the window. He waved at me. I said, okay. The police had locked the house when they left the night of the incident. So I walked around the house to check for tracks. There was none. No broken windows, the doors are intact. So I decided if I'm going to go in this house with a very slim possibility in my mind that somebody's still here, I'm still not going to just walk in. So I unlocked the door real quiet. As soon as I cleared the door, there was a picture up on the right-hand wall of the family. And there's a big knife stuck right in that picture. And written in magic marker, it said, I'm still here, come find me. At that point, I said, he's here. I don't know how, but he's here.
This was terrifying for this family. An intruder had been in the house and had held the family hostage. And now he's back again. He won't give up. Officer Steve Benzenson arrived at the Bowens' house, and he was certain that the intruder was still there.
I'm listening quietly, because now I'm thinking, I want him to think the homeowner's here, not me. And I look to the right, and I can see the hallway that goes down to the rest of the house, and there's another picture of the family with another knife stuck through it. And I said to myself, I gotta search this house, and I'm gonna need help doing it to get it right. So I backed out real quiet, and I got the radio, and there was a sergeant at the station. And I said, I need you up here now. We checked everything. Closets, between mattresses, under the bed, you name it, we checked it. Every place we could possibly think of, we checked. And we wound up in a laundry room downstairs. And I remember looking up at the ceiling going, I don't understand why we can't find him. And then, just like that, I looked up at the corner. There was a set of pipes from the upstairs bathroom, but they didn't like looking at the pipes. So they built a wall to hide the pipes. And I'm looking at this wall going, there's enough room someone could hide behind that wall. As soon as I walked over there and turned on the light, I saw there's a 4-foot pile of dirty clothes right there, and nobody stacks dirty clothes behind a false wall. I just moved a couple of pieces of clothing. I saw black hair, and I said, got it. He just looked at me out of the corner of his eyes, and I could see the wheels turning. I said, I want to see your hands real slow. And he's got a pistol right here. And he put his hands up real slow. When I saw they were empty, I reached in and grabbed him right by the arm. I said, let's go.
The intruder was a 16-year-old boy. His name was Daniel LaPlante.
This was no ordinary teenager. Beyond that, this was no ordinary criminal. After having arrested many young men, I was rather surprised by his unconcerned manner. This young man, despite his age, was very dangerous. And for the first and last time in my entire career, I bypassed the usual ritual of taking only 2 mugshots, and I took 6 of them, thinking that they would be used sometime in the future.
So Daniel suffered a lot of abuse as a child. He was abused by his father, his psychiatrist, by other people, sexually and physically and psychologically, for a long period of time, and he displayed really troubling behavior from an early age. He was a loner. He was somebody who didn't know how to deal with other human beings, and that only got worse with time.
He was held at my request without bail on the charges of kidnapping, but also for mental evaluation. At the time, we approached the assistant DA to really work hard on the case to get it before the judge. In other words, for his trial not to be delayed.
To be targeted by a psychopathic person like this is really shocking. So once they arrested the suspect, they realized that Tina had dated Daniel LaPlante once. He'd made contact with her over the phone, and then eventually they had a date and they went out for ice cream. And he misrepresented himself on the phone. He completely misrepresented who he was and what he looked like, and she got a bad feeling from him, so she broke it off after that one date. So that one date led to this guy stalking her and living inside the walls of her house.
Daniel was in and out of that house for 6 months. One of his acts was to remove electrical outlets so he could spy on the family members. And he was able to see when they vacated a room, leave his hiding space, and create these disturbing acts that would get the girls to fight among themselves and to tell their dad these stories of milk being drank, channels being changed. And it would allow him to slip back into his hiding place.
Everybody remembers that feeling of hearing something thump in the basement. thinking it's a monster, thinking somebody's hiding in the closet. In this particular case, it was actually true. It's terrifying that a single date just going out for ice cream and not progressing beyond that is going to turn into somebody breaking into your house and then tormenting you for months.
Whatever his plan was, whether it was to rape one of the daughters, whether it was to kill all 3 people, I can't be sure.
So Daniel LaPlante was sent to Bridgewater Hospital for psychiatric evaluation. And after that evaluation, he was diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder, and he was put into juvenile detention. And everybody felt they should be safe. Daniel LaPlante lived on Elm Street, and it was only a mile through the woods from the Gustafson's house, except Daniel LaPlante was in juvenile detention. Or so they thought. When he turned 17, the judge decided that he should be tried as an adult. And when Daniel LaPlante was charged as an adult, he was able to get bail.
He was brought before the judge not to be tried, but on a bail hearing. And the judge at the time, without any police input or presence, released him on $10,000 bail.
And his mother mortgaged their house and put up the $10,000 bail to get him out.
There's no question that the judge made a massive mistake. Daniel LaPlante was very dangerous. From terrorizing a family to kidnapping. When I found out about the murders, I said, I wonder what Danny LaPlante is doing lately.
Homicide investigators had this other violent, strange, bizarre crime with Daniel LaPlante living a mile from this triple murder. I think that's an aha moment for the police, but they didn't have any hard evidence to tie him to the murders other than his proximity to them and his prior violent past.
So at 7 o'clock that next morning, we reconvened at the crime scene to gather as much information, as much evidence as we can. Outside the house, there was a pillow lying on the ground. So I called in a state police canine tracking team. And we began a scented search. And the dog was on a heavy scent, tracking from the yard into the woods. And within a few minutes, one of the state troopers found a wet flannel shirt. In addition, there was also wet gloves in the woods.
So the police believe that those articles of clothing could have been involved with drowning the children.
And the canine immediately picked up on a scent from those items. It led us through the woods. And eventually led us to Daniel LaPlante's house. After we did the canine track, we applied for a search warrant. We executed that search warrant, did a complete search of the entire residence. Daniel was not there at that time. One of the key pieces that we found were a pair of wet socks in Daniel LaPlante's bedroom. And on the wet socks, we found a blonde hair. Could be from Abigail. In addition to that, we found some bullets. Those spent bullets matched the cartridges that were used to murder Priscilla Gustafson. There was no doubt that we were on the right track. After we recovered those items, we applied for an arrest warrant for Daniel LaPlante.
But at this point, Daniel had fled, and a manhunt was on.
We released his picture to the media, and the media ran with it.
24 hours after the triple homicide of the Gustafson family in Townsend, police are still on the hunt for their killer.
On the 6 o'clock news, the 11 o'clock news, they posted his picture. We tried to let people know we were looking for Daniel LaPlante, and anyone who could help us, we encouraged them to drop us a tip.
The media from Boston and from Worcester and from all over Massachusetts had descended on Townsend and Pepperell. And as a reporter, I was talking to the police officers, the chiefs of police. I mean, everybody was harried and frazzled. People who were off duty had come back on duty. Everybody was involved with this.
For the first time in my police career, and the last time, I put on my bulletproof vest. I felt Daniel would head to Northwest Pepperell because he knew it well. It's almost rural, heavily wooded, very easy to avoid detection. And my choice was prophetic. The reports of a suspicious young male in the area were almost immediate. And they were located within a wood area bordered by 4 roads. So we circled that area. I pulled into a driveway of one of the homes, and a lady said, "I know why you're here. I just arrived back home. Could you please come in my home while I re-enter it?" And I said, "We certainly will, ma'am." I asked my partner to remain in the cruiser. So upon our arrival into the home, it didn't take more than half a minute, and I heard a loud thud upstairs. I quickly asked the lady, "Do you have a pet?" She said, "I have a cat." I said, "That was no cat." Upon getting to the top of the stairs, I found a 16-gauge shotgun lying at my feet with the bolt closed, so assuming it was loaded. I believe that was the sound of the thud that I heard. We did a thorough search of the entire home. He had fled from an upstairs window, had jumped onto the garage, into the woods behind the home, and had taken flight. His goal was to take me out with a 16-gauge shotgun. I believe what deterred him was the presence of my partner in the cruiser. The husband of the house did indicate that the shotgun was his, but he indicated that a handgun was missing and also a belt of ammunition, and it was obvious that the intruder was attempting to arm himself.
Everybody knew that the killer was running around, and the police were everywhere. Every time somebody saw something move in the woods, they'd call it into the police.
People are locked into their homes in total fear, and they should have been. They absolutely should have been. When you kill 3 people, there were no bounds anymore. There was a real danger of him not just abducting anybody, but he would have killed them.
People knew they had to try to catch him before somebody else died.
This was one of the largest manhunts in Massachusetts history. Everywhere you turned, there was a police car, there was an officer looking for Daniel LaPlante. We knew this person was dangerous. We knew he had the potential to kill again. We needed to get him off the streets. You have to remember, we were dealing with this young person who hid himself in walls, who made his way through this forest. So this person was skilled at avoiding detection.
In a matter of 15 to 20 minutes, I do get a report that once again, faced with a police officer, this fleeing felon decided to run into a lumberyard in the town of Akia. My fear was with LaPlante armed with a handgun, somebody was going to get taken hostage, or somebody was going to get killed.
So the police cordoned off the area. They blocked off the streets. A police helicopter was up, and police were going through it. And at some point, one of the officers thought he heard something by a dumpster.
Several officers surrounded the dumpster. They ordered Daniel to come out. And he finally decided to surrender himself. He was transported to the state police barracks located on Elm Street in the town of Concord, Massachusetts.
He was charged with the murder of Priscilla Gustafson, Abigail Gustafson, and William Gustafson. I sat next to him during trial. His eyes were cold. He looked right beyond you. No remorse whatsoever.
So I covered the trial for my newspaper. I remember sitting in court and looking at LaPlante, and he was just without emotion, just expressionless. Like, he never showed an ounce of empathy. He never showed any discomfort for what was going on. Just a soulless look.
Jurors can follow this with their notebooks. Thank you.
There were several factors that linked Daniel to the murders. Shell casings that were found in the LaPlante home were the same exact type as those found at the murder scene. Also, a hair found on one of Daniel's socks was indeed from the head of the murdered Abigail Gustafson. And during one of the searches at the LaPlante home, the actual murder weapon was found, which was a .22 revolver in an abandoned vehicle located on the LaPlante property.
We also recovered 2 cable TV boxes and remote controls that were taken previously at the Gustafson home. So before the murders happened, LaPlante had been in that house previously.
Thank you. You may all be seated.
At the courtroom, ironically located at the intersection of Elm Street and Gorham Street, the jury found Daniel LaPlante guilty of the murder of 3 members of the Gustafson family.
Guilty of murder in the first degree.
He was sentenced to 3 consecutive life terms with no chance of parole. You're looking at somebody, perhaps, if such a thing exists, being totally evil. The lead investigator told me, "Tom, have you seen how Elm Street keeps popping up on this?" You know, his residence on Elm Street, he gets taken to the state police barracks on Elm Street in Concord. He's prosecuted, found guilty at the courthouse at the corner of Elm Street in Lowell, Massachusetts. There are 7 total Elm Street connections in this LaPlante saga, which is quite bizarre.
Was justice served here? I guess under the law, justice was served. But how can you ever recover from losing your wife and your 2 children and your unborn baby? So he was off the streets. But as far as the Gustafson family goes, I can't answer that question.
You know, a case like this is just so terrible, it's just so awful that people never get over it. Like, it's a kind of thing that makes people pause and really think, how could one human being do this to another? I've never forgotten it. You know, I covered it as a reporter, but I've never forgotten this case. It was evil showing its face.
2 beautiful children, another one on the way, and this terrible person broke into the house and ended it for no reason, just killed these people. There was no real motive that we ever uncovered, other than the fact that they walked in when he was in that house. This person was cold and evil personified.
Once upon a time, Elm Street was a good place to live.
We're the type of community where people still wave to you. The charm is there.
It's pretty, but we have our fair share of serial killers.
There was satanic rituals being held there.
Is he still out? Is he going to come after me?
A firefighter said something heinous had happened.
You don't really know when it's gonna happen or what's gonna happen or who's doing it.
I was screaming, my dad's dead. Someone's killed him.
Evil took over that night.
Being aware of the danger out there.
I don't know that I've ever seen a broadsword like that.
I don't see them as human. I see them as vermin.
Detectives found things that were beyond their wildest nightmares.
Police emergency, what's happening there, please?
Our next door neighbour is not answering. Upstairs, there's a bay window wide open.
Okay, how old is your neighbour?
Around about 77.
Does he live alone?
Yes.
David, it's the police.
David?
David? He's here. It's freezing cold. And that looks like ligature marks on his ankles to me.
West Midlands Police have been alerted to the suspicious death of an elderly man in Hales Owen, southwest of Birmingham. Crime scene coordinator Joe Ward is in charge of the forensic investigation.
A digital imagery and reconstruction team was carried out 3D scanning at the scene to get a geography of the actual house itself and to see what may be important or relevant for the investigation. So our deceased is positioned face down on the floor. There's ligature marks, quite deep indentations on the ankles and also on the wrists. And it looks like he may have had his hands tied behind his back. Elderly people pass away in their homes every day, but clearly something violent has taken place. We need to now find the forensic evidence to tell us what exactly happened in that room. There's a chair there that has got what appears to be telephone cable tied around the legs. And then you've got a pair of scissors and then a knife on the floor. It looks like there's blood on the carpet. There's a lot of paperwork that has been kind of thrown around on the floor, bank statements and things like that. The scene itself suggests to me it may have been a burglary that's gone wrong, but what the poor gentleman must have gone through prior to his death, it doesn't even bear thinking about. We try and kind of detach ourselves, but sometimes it does upset you.
While the body of the victim is sent for post-mortem, Joe joins homicide detective Tom Lyons for a briefing with the investigation team.
This is David Varlow. He's 78 years old, and we found him deceased on the 15th of November at Manor Lane in Hales Owen. As you can see here, there's an open window. So the hypothesis at the moment is that our offender has essentially scaled up this drain pipe and gone into David's house through his first floor window. And that's David's lounge on the ground floor. And this is how he was found, with his hands in an unusual position behind his back. Found untied, but the indentations in his wrists and his ankles seem to suggest he's been tied up for a long time. It's horrific what's happened to him. It looks like a burglary, but it appears as though he's been tied up and left to die. So from the off, we're investigating this as a murder. We know that his brother spoke to him on the 30th of October, so that's 15 days ago. David was someone who kept himself to himself, but he did have regular contact with his brother that lives in the northeast. When his brother couldn't get hold of him, he contacted neighbours, and when they couldn't get hold of him, it was them that called the police. So we've got a really big timeline here on where our offence could have happened. So the timeline we've managed to establish at the moment is David's body was found on the 15th of November. His brother spoke to him on the 30th of October. So we've got a 2-week period to identify when David's death has occurred. This is interesting. On the table, there's a half-drunk cup of tea, there's a half a bowl of cereal, the milk's there that's out of date, David's glasses, and a half-eaten bit of breakfast, essentially. And we've got a TV guide, and the date on that TV guide is the 3rd of November, so it might be a key date around the 3rd of November. Narrowing down the timeline is absolutely vital in figuring out when David has been tied up, when he's been left, and when he was last seen alive. There's his front door. The 2-week period does make it more problematic. There's more inquiries we've got to do, more CCTV to view. But the police's job ultimately is to protect the community. And for me, what makes this such a horrific crime is that David was attacked in his own home, where he's got the absolute right to feel safe. Thank you, everyone. We need to catch this person who has done this to David, so they won't be able to do this to anyone else.
With a murderer at large, the forensic team focuses on finding any traces the killer may have left at the scene.
We're concentrating on fingerprints, where we think the offender has climbed in. So there was a first floor window that was open, and then also items that have clearly been touched, drawers that have been opened, paperwork has been strewn around. One of the chairs was found in an unusual position, so possibly the perpetrator has left his fingerprints on the chair itself.
With the forensic operation underway, Tom Lyons searches police systems and discovers David recently contacted the police.
I came down earlier on when I heard something here. When you heard rummaging about, did you feel that was in the house or outside, or I'm not sure? Mm-hmm. Okay.
The incident occurred 3 weeks before David's body was discovered.
So we've got hold of body-worn video from the officer who attended David's address when David reported to the police a burglary at his house on the 24th of October.
And then you heard the glass smash? Yeah.
David basically says that the window's smashed and he sees a hand coming through.
Well, can you arrange for it to be repaired?
If you'd like us to, yeah, we can. We'll just get it temporarily boarded up so it's safe, so no one else can be sticking their arms through.
Well, okay, rightio.
Looking at David just reminds me of my own grandparents' house, really.
Yeah.
To see David alive and well on the body cam is just, quite upsetting. Seeing essentially an elderly, vulnerable man who's soon to be a victim of a horrific crime.
I'm going to say I'm getting on a bit.
How old are you?
78.
Oh, I just said you were 21.
I don't seem to quite look it, but I'm going to say I seem to be not very good mentally,
Knowing an offender has targeted David's house a week before, and then clearly someone has targeted him again, you have to ask the question, is that the same person who has gone back to a scene of a previous crime and he's essentially re-burgled David, which has then turned into a murder.
Extensive checks at the crime scene have only revealed fingerprints belonging to David. But the chair which had the cable attached has been removed and sent for further testing by fingerprint development manager Mia Webb.
Areas of particular interest are where we would expect the suspect to have handled the chair. So we're probably looking up here towards the top of the chair as if they've grabbed it like that, or again at the sides of the chair as if they've held it along the side of the chair to move the chair around the scene. And we'll start by examining with ultraviolet using a laser. The lasers will fluoresce any constituents or any contaminants to the fingerprint. Leather itself isn't very good to get fingerprints from, just because of the textured nature of the surface. There isn't any sign of any friction ridge detail.
A further process to help detect prints is known as superglue fuming.
The superglue will get heated to the point where it evaporates, and then it will be circulated around the chamber. The superglue will adhere to any water that's present in the sweat of a fingerprint.
Ultraviolet light creates a high-resolution image which enhances any fingerprint marks developed by the superglue treatment.
Again, there are no marks.
It's really disappointing that we've not been able to identify anyone through fingerprints. This may possibly suggest that they're forensically aware, so it may be that the perpetrator put gloves on, or if they don't particularly sweat a lot, they're less likely to leave ridge detail.
In a bid to narrow down when the crime may have taken place, Tom and CCTV specialist Glenn Manning focus on inquiries near to the murder scene.
CCTV usually only lasts between 14 and 30 days, so that really puts us up against it in terms of time to retrieve that evidence, basically. Right here.
Yeah, it's right here for Manor Lane.
All CCTV is obviously time dated, so if we can find proof of life of David on that CCTV, then it'll really narrow down when this crime and this happened. But we're also looking for suspicious people going towards or away from David's address.
We'll have to take from the scene here all the way back down the road because we don't know what the final route in or route out was. There's ring flood cams, doorbell cameras. Some of these are on motion, but a light will come on. We have to look at every single opportunity we possibly can and get those downloaded. So, cameras over there and there. Just up in the eaves up there as well.
Yep.
OK, Joe, can we go through the forensic search documents so we can just have a look what submissions you want to get in?
To decide on the next steps of the forensic investigation, Joe meets with Tom and DI Ranj Sangha.
So we've carried out fingerprint examination at the scene, but nothing was found. But the chair that was found nearby had actually got like a telephone cable around it. There's chances that there'd be some cellular DNA from whoever has tied that around the legs. Cellular DNA is what we refer to as touch DNA. So if you touch or handle anything, then you kind of shed skin cells, which then stick to the item, which then leave your DNA on that particular item. And then there was found a knife and some scissors. Now, again, has the offender or offenders used the knife and the scissors to cut that cable?
Yeah.
If they have, obviously they've had to have a firm grip, could we have cellular DNA on those items as well? Even if the perpetrator was wearing gloves, there's still an opportunity to get DNA. A lot of people are not aware of that. You have to put the gloves on, so you're still touching the outside of the gloves. And you may touch your face or any bare skin. Obviously then, the DNA testing may identify the perpetrator.
Forensic scientist Phil Field prepares to take DNA swabs of several items from the crime scene.
It's quite possible that these scissors have been handled by the offender at some point, and so we're just considering surface areas which we might be able to sample in an attempt to obtain some DNA material.
In the past, you needed quite a lot of blood to get a DNA profile from it, so usually something in the realms of the size of a 2p piece. These days, thanks to the increased sensitivity of DNA profiling techniques, we can obtain a DNA profile from not much larger than a pinprick.
So this cable has potentially been used by the offender to tie up and restrain the victim. If the offender has had quite forceful contact with the item, they've gripped it and pulled it in order to tie the victim up, that could have the effect of increasing the quantity of cellular DNA material that has actually been transferred from them to the item.
While the swabs are sent to a specialist lab for urgent processing, CCTV specialist Glenn and Detective Helen Robbins
Hi Helen, you're right.
start to forensically examine the hundreds of hours of footage gathered from near David's house.
So what we're looking for really here is to see if we've got David to try and find last sign of life.
Yep.
We know that David's property itself doesn't have CCTV footage, and we know that we've only got cameras either side of the property, but not near to or that has sight of his property. We'll start on the 15th of November, the day that we discovered David's body, and we'll work our way back from there towards the 30th of October. We'll also be looking for someone acting suspicious. We'll cover the nighttime economy times, because that's more than likely the time that you would have somebody going out and committing this type of offence. We're going to prioritise CCTV closest to the scene location. This is what we call Zone 1. But what we're looking at really is whether there's any golden nuggets contained within that footage. That may then lead us into another zone.
As well as searching for David's last proof of life, the investigation team has been awaiting a post-mortem result to confirm his cause of death. Joe has received the pathologist's report.
So examination of his heart noted significant disease to his coronary arteries. So he's obviously got the background of pre-existing cardiac disease. So in the pathologist's opinion, the medical cause of death is considered to be a stress-related cardiac event, and that the ligature restraint may well have compounded the heart disease on a psychological basis. A cardiac event is basically a heart attack, and a psychological episode is, he's frightened to death. For me personally, someone in your home is frightening enough, but for an elderly gentleman, he must have really been petrified and in fear of his life. Someone tied him up and just basically left him there.
While the post-mortem confirms David's cause of death, exactly when he died is still unknown. Forensic finance specialist Alex Backrath has been authorised to access his bank records to track when David last used his account.
So the deceased gentleman was found on the 15th. So going back 5 days worth of transactions, at present I've got 212 individual transactions over a 5-day period. £20, £20, £20. Lower limit transactions where 12, 13 of these are at the same supermarket. That raises concerns. If you're doing a transaction, why wouldn't you just do it in one go? There's a fee paid every time. Would a reasonable person be doing that with their own bank account and their own funds? In my opinion, these aren't the spending habits of a 78-year-old man. They are very erratic, transaction after transaction, seconds, minutes in between them. At the crime scene, there is bank statements on the floor strewn about the place. So I think that over this period, that car's been in the offender's hand and the offence itself happened further back than we originally anticipated. I'm going to need to go back to the bank and obtain further days, maybe weeks' worth of transactions.
While Alex needs to look deeper into David's accounts, it's become clear his bank card has been in the hands of someone else. Glenn can now refocus the CCTV search.
We've received a number of financial transactions from different places within Birmingham and also in Aylesbury. So the importance now is that we view the CCTV footage from each and every one of those locations. We need to start building up a picture of anybody that we may see on here in relation to those financials.
With David's bank account suggesting the crime took place several days before the discovery of his body, Joe and Tom have called in pathologist Brett Lockyer to see if he can help narrow down when David died.
David was found deceased on the 15th of November. Can we pinpoint the time of death?
So he has been deceased for some period of time.
Yeah.
There were signs of mummification. And also when he's found, his hands are still in that unnatural position behind his back. That's because rigor mortis has developed and his muscles have frozen into that position. So whilst it's not possible to say exactly when he did die, the post-mortem would indicate that he had been dead for a week, if not longer.
That's really helpful, thank you.
What I can say is that the act of tying him up would have happened when he was alive. The interesting thing, of course, is that had the ligature been removed immediately after he died, then you wouldn't necessarily see the blood settling, which is otherwise known as hypostasis. That only really occurs after the heart stopped beating. So they would indicate that the bindings have been removed after he's been deceased for a period of time.
Yeah.
But from the pathology, are you able to say a period of time he was tied up for before he was untied?
Well, I can't say exactly when he has been untied, but he certainly hasn't been untied within hours of being deceased. That's most likely to have occurred at a later period.
Speaking to the pathologist raises a few more questions. When was he tied up and when was he untied? And who's untied him? Could it be the offender has been in there for some time and untied him? Has the offender returned and untied him? Or is there a third party who's been in David's address, untied him, but for whatever reason hasn't contacted the police?
Based on the financial analysis of David's bank card, Glenn and Helen have been searching through multiple cameras from shops and cash points.
Most locations that have an ATM, or if a card is being used within a shop, for instance, the till area is going to be covered by CCTV. So now we've got the exact time and the location of the suspicious transactions. We would hope to see on that footage the person that has committed this horrendous crime. So in the early hours of the morning, we had the use of the bank card on the Broadway.
Oh, there's two cameras, camera 14 and camera 28.
What angle does the other one give you?
Glenn moves on to a second suspicious transaction, identified by the financial analysis.
Not sure that's the same person.
No, that looks like a woman, doesn't it?
It does look like a woman, exactly. And the timing of that is perfect for that transaction. It just appears that we're not just dealing with one person here.
November 12th, 14th, and then we've got females using his bank card. That is very surprising. I was expecting one person, but now there's multiple people using David's bank card. We've got to keep an open mind as to how many people now are involved in David's murder.
Officers start trying to identify the numerous people caught on CCTV using the bank card.
It does make the investigation more difficult. It gives us more lines of inquiry because we've now got to identify all these different people fraudulently using David's card.
While the search widens for David's killer, finance specialist Alex has gained authorization to look back further into his accounts.
So I've got transactions dating from the 14th of November going back. If we can identify where the victim's normal account usage ends and what we believe is the offender's usage starts, it really narrows down that time frame for when the offence happened. It looks like David's normal spending habits are trips to his local Asda, presumably do his weekly shopping, and he does do ATM transactions, but they are one-offs at a normal time in daylight hours. It looks like I've found the final legitimate transaction carried out by David. It's a purchase at his local Asda on the 2nd. Then from the early hours of the 3rd, the transactions from his account radically changed. And I believe the first suspicious transaction carried out by the offender and not by David is from the co-op at just after 6 o'clock in the morning on the 3rd of November. I think those early transactions are the offenders that took control of that card and committed this offence.
The first fraudulent transaction on David's card was committed 12 days before the discovery of his body.
In excess of £8,000 has been stolen fraudulently in over 300 different transactions.
A CCTV check with Asda confirms Alex's theory.
It's really sad to know that David had gone about his normal day, minding his own business, buying his groceries, unaware as to what was to come.
With the financial analysis revealing the time and place of the very first fraudulent usage of David's card, detectives can now pinpoint CCTV footage from the exact time of the transaction.
I'm now watching the CCTV from the transaction on the 3rd of November at about 5:30 in the morning. And I can see a male at the cash machine, and this male is not David Varlow. He's hooded up. He looks shorter. He's moving more freely. So this is our burglar.
The cash machine is just 2 minutes' walk from David's house, but the suspect is as yet unidentified. To see if they can find a clearer image, Tom and the team track the suspect as he crosses further CCTV cameras.
He's still got his hood up, and he's still got a mask on. And this is the number 9 bus pulling up at a bus stop. And it looks like there's a male who gets on. There's no other people walking up Spies Lane at this time. He's got distinct trainers, and he's got a distinct jacket with white markings on. And he goes upstairs on the bus. This is our first really good image. He's still wearing a mask and his hood up, but he's got really distinct eyes.
Joe has received the lab report on the items from the crime scene, submitted for DNA analysis.
Okay, so a mixed result was obtained from the sample taken from the knotted area of the cable which was wrapped around the rear left leg of the chair. They've examined the knife as well, and they sampled an area of the blade. The DNA profile of David Varlow, the victim, was obtained from blood that was taken from the blade of the knife. And then a mixed profile was obtained from the handle of the knife, which was enough in the partial profile to then do a search on the National DNA database. And a match was obtained. A DNA match is really hard to dispute in court as it's incredibly accurate. And in this particular case, it's 1 in a billion. Hiya, Tom, it's Joe.
I've just had the DNA results come through. Ah, excellent, go on.
Good news, we've got a name. Adriz Mohammed.
Adriz Mohammed, okay.
Yeah, so really, really good news there.
I'll start researching him now.
His nickname on our systems, or his alias, is Eyes. And his eyes are quite distinct on this CCTV. And looking at his last custody photo, comparing that to his image that we've got of him on the bus, the first image that we've got, he does have a similar hairline that you can see in our CCTV image, and he's got the same skin tone. He's been committing burglaries since he was a juvenile, and he's got 29 theft-related convictions, and it looks like he's committing burglary to fund his drug-related lifestyle. I think it's him.
Officers are dispatched to central Birmingham, where they arrest Adriz Mohammed close to his home.
Stand up here for us. You're right.
Good evening.
Hiya.
I'm one of the custody sergeants here. You've been here before?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay. What's your first name?
Adris, A-D-R-I-S.
A-D? R-I-S. And what's your surname?
Mohammed.
And what's under arrest for, please?
On suspicion of murder.
How are you feeling at the moment?
Just a bit. With what charges? That's shit in it. Sorry.
Ultimately, we want Adris to explain himself. We want him to tell us why his DNA is in that house, what's he doing in the area in the early hours of the morning. And if he is innocent of that crime, but he knows who did do it, break in and have the bank card, for him to tell us.
Detectives start by putting the CCTV evidence to Adris Mohammed.
Okay, so this is going down Spies Lane towards the Co-op and towards Manor Lane. First one is at 0513 at 36 Manor Lane, so not far away. Is that you?
No comment.
And then you get the figure returning at 0600.
Is that you?
No comment.
One of the problems is that David's house is not caught on CCTV, so we've had to identify the cameras that are nearest to his house on Manor Lane. So this person goes past this camera on Manor Lane towards David Varlo's house. David's house is here. This person doesn't go past this camera. And then half an hour later, we're going past the same camera again. That is the only person that makes that movement.
The figure heads back to the Co-op at Spies Lane and he's got hood up and he's seen on the footage at the Co-op at 0602 and they're using the cash point. And they check the balance and then they withdraw £250. Is that you?
No comment.
Have you got the PIN number for that card?
No comment.
Have you used force to take it from him?
No comment.
Have you put any type of restraint on Mr. Varlo?
No comment.
In relation to the other times that the stolen card's used over the next 10 days, there's over 300 incidents where it's used, and we believe there's various people that have been using it. So, have you given that card to anyone else?
No comment.
There's a lot of CCTV footage to all the transactions the card's been used at. Got one here from Diamond Travel on Dudley Road. You can see there's a female on the image. Do you recognise her?
No comment.
There's a male in brown trousers, dark blue gilet next to her. There you get a view of the top of the male's face, which I would say is similar to you. He appears to be a short male. On your custody record, it details you've been about 5'4". Is that right?
No comment.
When you do live in that world and you have that lifestyle, it's not uncommon for people to sell stolen bank cards. You know, he owes a debt and he's using that card to repay a drugs debt. Another explanation might be, did Adris hand that card off to kind of throw us off the scent somewhat, try and put the blame on someone else?
Adris Mohammed had no phone on him when he was arrested. But in a bid to link his movements to the CCTV evidence, digital media investigator Mark Hilton has been searching for any numbers that may be his.
Police systems and other systems accessible by the police has come up with a number finishing in 377 that's linked to Adris Mohammed. Some months prior to this incident, he actually used this phone number to call police and report some antisocial behaviour, giving his name and obviously that phone number. When we identify a phone number, we can apply for phone data. And what can sit within that data is where that phone number was when it was making and receiving calls and incoming and outgoing SMS messages. If the device is moving and therefore connecting to different cell masts as it's on the move, then we can successfully map where that A to B point is. So I want to see the location around the 3rd of November. And we can see immediately activations on these cell masts in the early hours. The blue marker there is Adris's home address. 5:19, there's a ping in Halesowen in the area of the deceased address, which is obviously the offence location and a key time for our victim's murder. And then from 6:16 onwards, he slowly makes his way back towards Birmingham on cell masts, moving towards his home address. So we can see straight away that the Halesowen ping at a significant time is really key.
Looking further back into Adris Mohammed's phone usage data, Mark discovers something else.
An attempted break-in was also reported at our victim's address on the evening of the 24th of October. So if we look through the data of the number that's attributed to Adris, you can see from the activated cell site mass, 2307, 2309, there's clear movement to Manor Lane in Halesowen. And we know that that is around the time of the alleged break-in at Manor Lane. But then after this time, we can see at 1:19, the cell site's activated by that phone, moving away from Halesowen and back towards the Birmingham area. So it's planned, because it shows that there's a recce of that address on the 24th. Then on the 3rd, Adris Mohammed has gone with purpose, with intent on the 3rd. He knows where he's going. He's gone specifically straight to that address, to that location, and committed the crime he has on an elderly, vulnerable man.
You went there on the 24th as well and tried to break in, but he disturbed you.
No comment.
You thought, well, I haven't gained entry at this point, but my intention is to come back and try again.
No comment.
Is that why you've gone back on the 3rd?
No comment.
Was it a case of it's just gone terribly wrong when you were there?
No comment.
Or did you intend to cause him some harm?
No comment.
With Adris Mohammed giving no account of what happened in David's house in the early hours of the 3rd of November, detectives turned to the DNA evidence.
Blood staining was found on one side of the knife, and on the handle of the knife was found your DNA.
No comment.
Your DNA on the knife that's got David's blood on it.
No comment.
Explain to me how that's happened.
No comment.
Other than the fact that you had that knife and you've threatened David with it, assaulted David with it, caused him injury that's led to his blood getting on there.
No comment.
This is a 77-year-old bloke who's never hurt anyone, and he should be able to feel safe in his own house. A house where he's always lived, where he's grown up, where his family's lived before him. This isn't the clearest image, but we can see the male Ellie's getting on a bus. How frightening would that be to somebody who's just sat having a breakfast, reading a TV guide, looking forward to maybe what's coming on the TV later on that evening, and that figure appears stood next to them. It's horrendous. I can say in my career, I think this is the worst case I've ever dealt with.
He's restrained a vulnerable person and caused him, no doubt, pain and suffering. However, whether he's committed murder or not, ultimately it hinges on what Adris's intent was when he tied up David Varlow and left him to die. Did he know that that was a possible consequence of his actions? For me, that's part of the intent to commit murder.
The CPS authorises Adris Mohammed to be charged with the murder of David Varlow, and he is remanded in custody. But there are still unanswered questions relating to the timeline around David's death.
David was found on the 15th of November. 2nd of November, David was alive because we've got him using his bank card in Asda in Hales Owen. However, by the 3rd of November, we know that bank card was in the possession of this man. From forensic work and phone work, we've identified Adris Mohammed. I'm absolutely satisfied that Adris Mohammed is responsible for David's murder. But we've still got a really big unanswered question. The pathology indicates that David Varlow was tied up for some time, but Adris was only in his house for 30 minutes. So someone must have come back and untied him. Has the offender returned? Or could it be different people using David's bank card have gone to David's house and untied him? But we still don't know who untied him, when and why.
To interrogate Adris Mohammed's movements from the time the crime was committed until the discovery of David's body, Mark further analyses his phone data.
We know that he's in and around his home address from the 4th of November to the 5th of November, where at 17:57 there's very fast movement from a cell mast in Birmingham up towards Wolverhampton, which is much quicker than you would see on the conventional foot or bike or even by car at that time. Rail inquiries reveal CCTV at New Street train station in Birmingham. And then we can also see 18:30, he arrives in the area of Stafford, where he continues to use his phone, connecting to masts in and around his ex-partner's home address. And then on the 11th of November, there's movement on cell masts back towards Birmingham. And then we can see the Hales Owen ping. So there's a confirmed hit in the Hales Owen area, which is the deceased's address. And the mapping now is overwhelming in terms of the fact that it shows him moving by train on the 11th back down from Stafford to the offence location at Hales Owen.
There's a number of cameras here. I'm just trying to find the right one.
Confirmation that Adris Mohammed revisited the scene of the crime on the 11th of November, 8 days after the initial burglary, prompts Glenn to review CCTV footage from that day.
Oh, this is interesting. Oh, I think Tom would like that.
I think this is Adris Mohammed. But there's 2 people at the cash machine. This is a complete shock because I was only expecting one person. The one at the cash machine looks like the same height as Adris, but the one standing behind him, he looks a lot taller than who we think is Adris. The fact there's 2 people, that means potentially, there was another person involved.
The team can now focus on the pair's movements.
So this is a few doors down from David Varlow's address, and we can see 2 males walking away from David's address. And they haven't appeared in any of the footage the other side of David's. So the hypothesis is that they've gone to David's address, they've come out half an hour later and walked up the road towards the cash machine. This means basically that a second person has gone to the address with Adris. So have they gone inside? Have they moved the body? Have they untied David? So we need to identify that person because potentially, he's involved in this murder.
Not only does the CCTV reveal a second person at the cash point, but further financial inquiries reveal that the card they were using was different to the original one stolen from David.
One of David's expired cards was used on the evening of the 11th going into the 12th of November. We know that card wasn't used before the night of the 11th and early morning of the 12th. If it had been stolen in the initial burglary, then why didn't they use it earlier? The question for me is that Adris confided in someone about this murder and that someone returned to the scene with Adris to assist him. What I'm doing now is going through our intelligence systems, looking at Adris Mohammed's associates to see if any of them match that person that we've got on CCTV. And we've identified this male, O'Shea Swan. He's considerably taller than Adris Mohammed. And looking at his facial features, his height, his broadness, he matches the person on the CCTV at the cash machine. Looking at his associates and looking at Adris's associates, they kind of mix in the same circles of people with drug-related lifestyles. So we need to get O'Shea Swan in custody to understand his involvement.
O'Shea Swan is arrested and is home searched for any evidence he accompanied Adris Mohammed on the night of the 11th of November.
O'Shea, so you've been arrested this morning from your home address.
Right. After I arrested you, obviously a search of your room took place, and police officers have recovered 3 handsets. What phone did you own? Was it the 821 or was it the other number you gave us? No, it would have been the 821.
So you've accepted the fact that 821 was your phone number. I just want to talk through the movements of that particular phone number. On the 11th of November, approximately 1837, it's in the area of Alston Street, an address that you frequent. But after that time, there's not a lot of activity until, so 3 seconds after midnight on the 12th. It's in the area, Halesoe Inn at Manor Lane, which is our address, okay? And as we've seen the CCTV, it fits with that.
Yeah. But you're saying to us that you did not go to that address with Adris Mohammed on the 11th. Okay.
As well as being suspected of burglary and fraud, Swan has also been arrested on the more serious crime of assisting an offender in a murder case.
Our hypothesis is that the person who burgled the house on the 3rd of November has tied up David Varlow. On the 11th into the 12th of November, 2 people have gone back, okay? And the assistant offender is because the second person who went into that address, if they went in and possibly untied him and moved him, has assisted with either trying to conceal it or trying to hide the body or whatever they've tried to do. So are you still saying to me and Mark that you did not go to Manor Lane? You didn't go there? You did not go to that address? That isn't you in the CCTV and it wasn't you in possession of that phone? No.
Looking at all the evidence, O'Shea Swan has travelled all that way for a reason. My view is he's travelled all that way to help Adris Mohammed. Help him do what? We don't know. But that's when we think either O'Shea or Adris has untied David. If he died, tied and attached to the chair, one of them must have untied him and moved the chair. When we found that chair, there was banking documentation and a checkbook on top of the chair. So, shockingly, that means that someone must have been going through that paperwork in front of David's deceased body. For me, it's beyond horrific.
Tom and Joe meet to decide on the evidence they'll put to the CPS for a charging decision against O'Shea Swan.
We haven't actually got any forensic evidence for O'Shea, like to put him inside the premises.
Yeah.
But that's not to say that he's not been in there.
We're never going to know what O'Shea knew was going on inside that house. And ultimately, because we can't place O'Shea in the house through forensics, witnesses or CCTV, we can't ask CPS to authorise a charge of assisting offender. So the plan with O'Shea is that we're going to go for a charge of burglary and then fraud using David's bank card at the cash machine with address.
The verdict turns on how the judge and the jury interpret the evidence. For Idris, was it intentional, a murder, or was it manslaughter, or a burglary that went wrong? It's just a real awful and such a sad case.
Hi Joe, I just wanted to give you the results.
Yeah, I've been waiting for this call.
So,
Adris has been sentenced to 33 years in prison minimum. So he's got a life sentence, but he's got to serve a minimum of 33 years.
33, that's a lengthy sentence, isn't it?
it is, it's really, really good.
It just shows the jury, when they found him guilty, they, believe that Adris did have intent. The intent was there to murder David. There's obviously aggravating features in this case in terms of the fact that he's tied up a vulnerable male. He's left him to die. He's caused him a lot of pain and suffering. But ultimately, Adris Mohammed is off the street for 33 years and he won't be able to do this to anyone else.
Forensics played a huge part in identifying the offender in this case with regards to DNA testing. And if he did try and put us off the scent by moving the body, untying him, distributing the bank cards, he did a real poor job.
And as for Swan's got 6
years for burglary and fraud.
We couldn't
put him in the scene, could we? So, I mean, that's also a good sentence, isn't it?
No, it's really good.
Regarding O'Shea, the judge concluded that when he went with Adris Mohammed to burgle David's house, O'Shea knew that Adris had killed David Varlow, and that potentially will add weight to the severity of his sentence.
This particular case has really highlighted to me that there are bad people out there that will do horrible things to elderly people. But the way I kind of think of it is I can't change what's happened, but what I certainly can do is get justice for the victim and their families. That really kind of drives me on every job, to get justice for them.